Well, welcome back to the Coffee Show. I am your host, Kirk Pearson, and today we're talking all things about the Brewers Cup competition. So in a few short weeks, the best filter brewers from around the world will travel to Jakarta to find out who is the best at brewing an individual cup of filter coffee. I'm joined today by Brydon Price, who's the judge operations lead. So you're in charge of the judges who will effectively select the World Brewers Cup champion. Brydon, welcome to the Coffee Show.
Thanks for having me, Kirk. It's nice to catch up before what it will be a big week in Jakarta next week. And as you say, it'll be one that in my world, where we find the 2025 World Brewers Cup champion.
Do you think that as competitions evolved over the years, the desire to be a World Brewers Cup champion or a World Barista champion, I think there's more and more entrance into the competition itself. And even though I feel like the World Barista Championship is the most coveted sort of position, the World Brewers Cup Championship is the one that people enter the most. Like the level of interest is just so beyond what is in the barista competition and maybe even the latte art competition. Would you agree with that?
100%. We've seen that in a real growth of competitor numbers around the world. And certainly the engagement of the coffee community around the Brewers Cup. No longer is it a secondary competition to the barista competition, which has often been the glamour event of the coffee competition world. And we've really seen a consistent, a renewed interest in brewed coffee and competition. But also, I think, largely because it also translates so well to the home coffee drinkers.
That's correct, yeah.
And retail coffee.
You could, in theory, be a home brewer today and just have that level of interest and be a Brewers Cup competitor with no ties to a coffee shop at all. You could do it pretty easily these days, right?
Yeah.
I think so. Like if you're an enthusiast, you've got a few kettles, you've got everything you need to actually make the coffee, the scales and all that sort of things. You could easily buy yourself a small electric roaster like a Link, for example, buy some green from a producer individually. Like the opportunity is there if you really wanted to. If you're not tied to a coffee shop at all and you want to be a Brewers Cup champion next year, you could start today.
Yeah. I mean, never before have we had access globally to so many incredible coffee choices. So yeah, the barrier to entry for Brewers Cup is low, but I think people's understanding of the competition and what makes a champion is maybe some of the stuff that we can talk to today.
Well, let's start with what your role is, and just to give a preface to that. So I think it was really important to me to do this podcast so that people have something to listen to and inform themselves on before the competition itself. I've been tooting the horn about this for a while now, is that I think we need to do as much as we can in kind of the coffee media landscape to promote the competitions, get more and more people into it, get some bums on seats. I was inspired by, and I bring this up and some people disagree with it, but MMA. I'm a big time fight fan, but one thing they did was they did everything they could in the early years to promote the sport. And, it sounds bizarre, but they tried to make it more safe, and then they tried to broadcast it in different ways, get star-studded commentators, and it worked. And you look at that sport today, it's worth billions and billions and billions of dollars. Can coffee get there? I don't know. I hope so. But that's why I think this is important. Over to you. So you're the judges operations lead for the entire event.
Correct.
And my understanding is there's actually 3 people in your position?
Yeah, so there'll be 3 of us this year. I have some great colleagues, Karsia and Catherine, who will also be acting in the same capacity. And really, it's an extension of a role that I've been lucky enough to do for a number of years with the WCC, acting as a WCC representative. So each competition around the world, in terms of the national competitions, will have at least one rep present to help steer the competition, ensure that it's conducted to the rules and regulations, handle any conflicts, and help the national bodies really have a successful event. Really, the judge operations lead role at a world finals is an extension of the same. So the 3 of us will essentially steer the ship from a judge's perspective. We will fundamentally and importantly run a 2-day calibration ahead of the event to ensure that the numerous judges that we have from around the coffee world have a consistent appreciation of what we're looking for in a Brewers Cup champion. We will roster, where the judges are across those few days to put the best judges in front of our competitors, and really also step in and help the competitors with their journey through the competition. So we'll be accessible to them through the competition if they've got any questions and queries from a judging side or a logistics side as a judge operations lead also.
The calibration. This is one thing I feel like the common listener could really, this is something everyone should know about. What does the calibration entail? Like when you're calibrating, how do you calibrate judges? Because to outline this, there's a challenge in getting people from all over the world and effectively being able to have them tasting a similar thing. And calibration's a really strange thing. Like in cupping, for example, I feel like it's quite easy to calibrate. In my own experience, when I'm traveling to Origin, it took me 2 or 3 days to sort of calibrate with other people that I'm cupping with. And after that period of time, you're effectively tasting the same thing and you're on the same page about what you're all tasting and scoring coffee. I feel like it's tough to do it when you're trying to select the best brewer in the world. So how do you go about it?
Oh, look, it is a challenge. It's a process which I think we're always getting better at. Striving for perfection, but I think it's probably a reach to think that it's going to be perfect. Mm-hmm. But we're also recognizing that each of the judges who are attending, whilst they are coming from very diverse coffee markets, they will have very diverse, I suppose, coffee preferences. We're all certified judges. So we've really already worked on the process of trying to really remove bias from our appreciation of what is good, bad, or excellent coffee, but really, what coffee stands up to what we're looking for from the rules and regulations of the competition and what the score sheet says is a good coffee.
And so I'm interested in what you said there. They're accredited judges. So it's not like just anyone can go and do it. They want to be a World Brewers Cup champion. They've got to have a bit of experience and, I guess, recognition in the system for a few years, or?
100%. In order to certify, you need a certain level of experience within your national competitions and or travel out to others around the world. And then there's a regular certification and recertification process for judges to stay current and stay current on the rules and regulations and also be practicing and putting that experience to the test.
Because this is one thing I feel like I'd like people to know about what we're discussing now, because a lot of competitors, they'll feel, you hear their feedback after and they think, oh, this judge didn't give me this judge didn't see that, despite the others two got it doing it. And I guess it's good to have a certain level of confidence in the judging and to know that, one, you need to have some hurdles completed, I guess, and then two, that you're reassessing. That's good. I like that.
Yeah.
Gives me a lot more confidence. So what are the judges looking for in a Brewers Cup champion?
I suppose as a discipline, the Brewers Cup tests, certainly for the champion, two quite different skill sets in a way, which is a little more unique to the Brewers Cup Championship, say to maybe the Barista Championship or the Latte Art Comp, which is a very singular skill being put to the test. Yeah. The competitive baristas and Brewers Cup will be asked to present what we would call an open service, so their own coffee, their own presentation, and express their own knowledge of what that's going to taste like in the cup and how that's going to score with the judges. But in order to be the champion, you're also going to need to do the compulsory round. Yeah. The compulsory round, I think, is really where a lot of people look at the Brewers Cup competition and say that's really the strength of it. Yes. Is that we objectively test the barista's skill in brewing a coffee that they've never brewed before. Mm-hmm. So really it talks to, their brewing skills, which is done without any form of presentation. They get a coffee, they have time to practice with it, and then they have a small amount of time to brew and present that to judges blind. Mm-hmm. I think it really is, it's a very level playing field that maybe doesn't always exist in some of the other competitions. So the barista is really put to the test in terms of what they've done to prep for the competition, but also what they can prepare on the fly of the compulsory round.
Something we discussed, so we had a chat a few days ago about some of this stuff, and one thing that I listened to a few years ago was a James Hoffman sort of critique of his own routine when he won the World Barista Championship. And one thing he said that really stuck with me is that he primed the judges to want to give him a good score. So, and you and I both spoke about how you were in Belo Horizonte in 2018. So this is in Brazil for the World Brewers Cup. And at that competition, I saw Emi Fukuhori. And I think within the first minute, she had won the competition. She just had the judges smiling from ear to ear. Like, obviously, there's other criteria you have to fill, but it's almost like a sales. It's like a salesman. You need to sell yourself and sell your coffee as well. So how does that influence a judge?
Look, like I think more now the Brewers Cup more than ever actually appreciates that skill. We're assessing the quality of what's in the cup. Yes, we are assessing the accuracy of their descriptors to that cup. But importantly, we're also assessing their skills as a coffee professional. And really that translates a lot into how comfortable you might make a customer feel, or someone you're really trying to communicate your coffee product to is appreciated on the score sheet. We need to understand the intent of each competitive barista. And that's a far easier thing to do when judges are feeling comfortable, when judges are feeling engaged, and that's really where you see a lot of the really strong barista competitive performances, drawing the judges in to the performance, but also for people watching along online or the crowd really getting drawn into those performances. It really just makes it easier for us to understand the intent of the barista.
Suppose that someone competing in Jakarta is listening to this podcast, this show. What's your advice to them on how to best do that? Because it's one thing for us to sit here and say, "Oh, customer service this, customer service," and in theory, that's one thing. But in practice, if you're sitting there as you have done before, and someone's doing their routine, performing their routine for you, how would you be best influenced in that way?
Oh, look, I think importantly in my role, I don't want to be coaching anyone in a direction, but really just ensure, like, all I can say is just ensure that judges will fully understand the intent of your choices in your performance.
One thing that we spoke about as we were walking up here is that you can kind of tell when someone hasn't practiced, and that the continuous reps is what kind of separates adults from children, I guess. Let's just say. Can you tell in the opening minutes of a routine if someone hasn't practiced enough, and it kind of affects your experience?
Yeah, I mean, somewhat. We're probably not going to draw that assumption of how much they've practiced, but in a general sense, that will translate into the cup that we're scoring. It's a very difficult skill set to brew 3 coffees and have those coffees be of the same quality and the same consistency. I think it's really underestimated what a challenge that is.
Yeah.
Coffee, it's an agricultural product. We can do everything that's in our power as a barista. We can practice as many times as we like, but the variables on the day and the variables of the product that we're just working with mean that the consistency of 3 cups of coffee is far more challenging to achieve than people think. And that really applies. We see that in the world of the barista competition as well. There's a lot of external factors that come into play. So the well-practiced and the well-rehearsed barista has really just eliminated as many of those variables as possible.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because the lengths that some people go to make their routine and their coffee the best it can be is quite extraordinary. And sometimes I feel like when I hear some of the things that people do, I often ask myself, like, is that really going to work? Is that really going to make a difference? But you're right. And, people do as much as they can from assessing the humidity in the air while they're brewing and the temperature at different stages. Sometimes I feel like to myself, that won't actually make a difference. But I mean, you're traveling all across the world. I think even taking coffee on an airplane, some people measure like the oxidization of it, like all sorts of things. But you're right, it's impressive. How will this year's Brewers Cup be different to previous years? So I've got some notes here saying that you've got a few changes to the opening rounds, and then there's 9 finalists, is there?
Yeah, so the format will change importantly a little this year. And that really talks to, as we're speaking to before, the popularity of the competition, the increased number of competitors, the scale of the competition is growing. So the way in which we can run the competition for the best result and the fairest result for the competitors has also changed. So importantly now, if a competition is running with over 38 competitors, which we have well in excess of for the 2025 championships.
How many are there?
I think last standing, don't quote me, but I think we were sitting at about 52. Okay. The competition this year will be every competitor will be given the chance to present their open service routine. So the first 2 days of competition, each competitor will deliver their open service routine for the judges. We'll then see at the end of day 2 a nerve-wracking, as it always is, cut to select our finalists. And you're correct, it'll be 9 finalists going through to the final day of the competition. And then on that final day of competition, each of those 9 will do both a compulsory round and an open service round.
So previously had it been 2 rounds, and now it's 3 rounds, and now it's 2.
It has been, it's been a few different formats through the years, as I say, evolving alongside the competition. Certainly when I first judged the World Finals, we actually ran both compulsory and open for every competitor. That was something that we could achieve when we had, competitor numbers in the 20s. But when we're trying to run a competition, as we are across 3 days of what's going to be a fantastic coffee show at World of Coffee, we need to make that work within a certain time frame, and we will do that as best we can to find, the most deserving champion.
And so you've got a new score sheet this year as well. So I think in our discussions you had mentioned that basically the score sheet was very similar, if not exact same, as a cupping score sheet, and now you're changing it. So if we're thinking of a cupping score sheet, which outlines things like taste, sweetness, acidity, balance, aroma. Have I got it all there? Is there any more I'm not thinking of?
Yeah, in essence.
And then it's switching to what?
So this year the score sheet is not radically different. But for the last few years now, we have been evolving into what is quite a radically different score sheet from what we used in the past. And you're correct. Previously, really, the Brewers Cup score sheet was in essence really just a cupping sheet with a couple of scores on the bottom for accuracy and the overall presentation. So very much it was focused almost squarely really as to purely what was in the cup. What we moved to is something which is a score sheet, which is a little bit more, I suppose, in line with what the CVA is looking to do in terms of really allowing different coffees to be scored specific to their attributes. But importantly, also the score sheet evolved to really reward further the choices that the barista has made in why that coffee has tasted how it is in the cup.
Okay.
So I suppose it makes it a greater skill set than maybe just finding yourself at the best coffee and purely brewing that as well as you can. Really now you need to learn that coffee. You need to understand and achieve the accuracy in the cup of what you said was going to be in the cup. But also importantly, we've also increased the weighting on the scores of the presentation and I suppose where we talk about a champion being an ambassador for the specialty industry, really recognizing that in what is delivered as well.
Something I want to further ask you about of what you just said is, so you're enabling coffees to be scored for their own unique attributes effectively. So what does that mean in practice? So if the score sheet's evolving to kind of better let other specific coffees shine, let's just say, or not specific, but all coffees, is that like, I don't know, an anaerobic ferment, for example? A lot of them are very funky, have different flavors that I guess the conventional SCA cupping score sheet might have been punished, like, might not have got the clean cup scores sort of thing. Does this new score sheet kind of better allow them to shine or not disqualify them for having those qualities?
To some extent, yes. I suppose in terms of objective coffee and objective cup components, no. So that's really where the top of our score sheet still is a little more in line with the previous score sheet. It's really assessing cup components of the flavor, the aroma, the acidity, and what we now call the mouthfeel of the coffee. Those things are still being assessed quite objectively. But what we are looking to recognize is that some of those things where they may not be objectively high scoring components, if that's the intentional result of the barista, we now have the ability to reward that in terms of the accuracy scores. So really understanding that the deliberate choices that are made by the barista are still being rewarded in terms of the skill set, right? Like it's a brewing competition.
Yeah.
So if a competitor's chosen to use a particular water or a particular brewing device, to achieve particular components in that coffee score, whether or not it has, I suppose, met the objectives of what we're looking for in terms of balance in the cup, we still have that ability to recognize that the intent of the barista is being rewarded in the routine.
I like that. One thing I kind of hear about competitions all the time when I know people that are competing, they always say to me, the judges are looking for this year. The judges are trending towards appreciating coffees like a washed, for example, although in brewers it's not typically a washed. Maybe that's more of a barista thing at the moment. Is there any truth to that?
Yeah, look, I think there's a partial truth to that, right? And that partial truth is that the coffee industry is always evolving. Coffee trends are, I suppose, are different in different parts of our world. So yes, I suppose coffee trends in one region that judges are coming from may be different from the coffee trends as they exist, say, here in the Australian industry. That really is where the importance comes back to I suppose, that calibration process, and really just making sure that we are assessing coffees and putting that bias away, and that the rules and regulations and the score sheet are the only real thing that we're applying to the objective qualities in the cup. But yes, I mean, the whole point of evolving the score sheet has come from the fact that coffees have changed and trends have changed. If we really just had the more linear processing methods and the more traditional styles of coffee in play, maybe we wouldn't actually need the score sheet that we now have. So yes, but the job of the competition is to evolve and follow those trends.
Yeah.
The ultimate aim of all the coffee competitions is to promote our industry, from producer to consumer, and that really comes from pushing boundaries.
Is it easier to assess like a Eugenoides coffee that's brewed as a filter, maybe it's blended, compared to like a wash geisha from Panama for a judge?
Yes and no. But fundamentally no. Really, just because we're assessing each cup component. Certain coffees will definitely lean towards a certain style and particular cup components, but the overall assessment of the coffee is going to be pretty level across any varietal or any processing method, providing that it meets what we're looking for in the cup.
One thing competitors tell me often before they compete and after they compete is that they're saying they're using one coffee, but they're using another. So they'll just sort of lie about the coffee they're using. And I don't understand why people do this, because you can't get penalized for the coffee you use. And I think the argument might have been someone might be using a co-fermented coffee in the past, which my understanding is that's now permitted to do, right? Can you use a co-fermented coffee in a brewer's competition?
Yeah, look, anything that we deem to be, a primary processing is allowable. So really, there's very little reason to hide from the judges why your coffee is as excellent as it is.
I've never understood it.
I think maybe when there has previously been maybe a concern around bias to certain coffees, maybe it's happened. I've certainly never heard any truth to that. But also I don't really see any great benefit in doing it.
Yeah. Well, they just like, for me, I've heard previously that some companies might have more supply of another coffee. And then if you use something that's far more expensive, but in lower quantity, but you say it's that other one in greater supply, then if you win, you can sell more of it. But yeah, I've never really understood it. And it's not like you can just point blank say, I think you use the wrong coffee, right? Like, how are you going to, because how do you prove that?
And regardless, you're certainly not winning anything with the judges. You're not improving any chance of winning. Anything post competition that comes from your coffee choice is really by the by, because you've still got to win the competition first.
So if I'm saying to you, I use a Macava CM natural geisha or whatever, that's what I tell you I'm using, but really I use a Eugenoides blend or something like that. If you're sitting there as a judge and you're pretty confident, I've tried that coffee, I don't think you're telling me the truth, would it affect you in any way?
No.
Okay. So you just purely just having to assess the score in the cup, what they're telling you, and all that sort of thing?
Yeah, look, I mean, the amazing thing that we have as judges in the Brewers Cup is that most of the coffees which are being presented to us are exceptional lots of coffee. So we're pretty excited about drinking. Pretty much everything's going to be put in front of us, right?
Yeah.
So no, you're not really going to win yourself any points by saying one coffee is this or another. We're pretty excited about drinking every cup that's put in front of us, to be honest.
One thing that I feel really passionate about, and I've spoken to a few people that are quite involved with the SCA about this, and I really want to try and start the movement a few years, or now, so hopefully that in a few years we can achieve this. But I think the coverage of the Brewers Cup and the barista competition and all competitions could do with a bit of a spruce up, let's just say. And if I'm to take it back to and use another combat sport analogy, I'm a big time boxing fan. And in boxing, over the 12 rounds, they'll have like a live scorecard, and I'm constantly checking the scorecard to see who the judge, the commentators who are experienced, who do they think is going to win, and often it doesn't match up, and that's sometimes tragic, but it also kind of makes the sport what it is. Like, your perspective might have been so wrong, but where I apply this to coffee is, I think some of the broadcasting is kind of going away from it, so people can't have their commentary as involved in the stream. But I feel like whoever's commentating, if there is any, they should actually have tried the coffees beforehand, because then they can give credible analysis to whoever's listening. And why that's important is because if we want to not everyone can go to a World Brewers competition, but I think a lot of people want to tune in. And I think it's important to best cater to those people who tune in, because one, they're in greater numbers than those in attendance at the shows. And two, if we want to promote the sport, promote the activity, we need to do everything we can to make it as enjoyable. And some people might argue that, well, Kirk, if you do that, maybe the person who's tried it could tell other competitors and it cause dramas. Maybe. I don't think that's a huge deal. If your judges are as, it sounds like the judging's quite professional. So, 100%. I mean, I'd like to think they can, not be influenced by those sorts of things or not have trouble caused. But do you see any barriers to that happening, or do you disagree with me? Hit me. Like, if you disagree, just point blank, just come at me.
Yeah, I disagree.
Why?
And look, I think as you spoke to with a boxing pundit scoring a fight versus how the actual judges are scoring a fight, there is a sense of removal there to start with. And it is so different in terms of what's going to be served to our judges versus what anyone's going to taste necessarily outside of the confines of that 10-minute performance. So yes, there's a relevance to it, but I do think it's always going to be a little bit too removed. I think what we have seen being opened up a little bit, and maybe a lead that should be taken from the barista competition, at least in terms of the final rounds, is there does tend to be a level of tasting in between competitors, the chance to interview the baristas and have them explain their coffee, to the viewing public. Great way to reduce barriers. But also in the Brewers Cup, at least in terms of attendees, brewers are encouraged to bring that coffee in sufficient quantity that they can serve that on the brew bar, and public can come and engage in their own time with baristas brewing that coffee for them.
I guess my rebuttal to that would be people aren't watching what's going on in between the routines. It's, they're watching the routines. So that's where I'd like that to kind of happen. So if there's anything else that can be done in the future to improve that experience, I just think, because there's a lot of ambiguity about competition judging, right? So
yeah,
the judges receive the experience. It's not like the listener or viewer can taste the coffee for them. They can see everything else going on, and with technicals they could make their own assessment. But with judging, a lot of it happens behind closed doors, and so not that I think that should be opened up to 100% transparency, but I think there's a higher level that could occur that would make the viewership a lot better, which would grow the sport. I'm just going to call it a sport.
Yeah, look, whilst I disagree in principle with some of what you're suggesting, I think I do agree with the overall objective of that. As yes, breaking down the barriers as to why a cup is being scored what it is, or a barista is being scored as they are. increasing engagement from the community in terms of what's happening in these events. Absolutely, we have work to do there.
Because brewers can be a bit of a tough watch.
I don't have the solution, but I do appreciate absolutely that's a direction that we'll need to continue to find ways to be more engaging with our competition as well as all the competitions, to make it maybe as approachable as the latte art. Very easy to understand, right? Very easy to follow along. How we set the Brewers Cup up, I think, it could be a little bit more exciting.
Question without notice: what are there like 2 or 3 coffees that you can recall that a competitor served you that you're like, they're some of the best I've ever had in my life?
Look, for me, the coffees that I remember are the coffees which have really challenged me. Yes, we've had some incredible expressions of coffees that I would expect to be amazing, like some incredible high grind, Panama geishas, or maybe in recent times, if we're looking at Cedra and other, glamour varietals. But it's when new varietals are coming through, like a Eugenioides, for certainly, are the ones that really just challenge you as a judge to really, as I say, like drop your biases, like whether I like that profile or not. Can I set that aside and assess that to the relative cup qualities? It's the challenging coffees were actually the ones that you remember the most. And certainly Eugenioides, for me, the first time I tried it in that format, was a really challenging one to wrap my head around with, because it was so different from the traditional styles of coffee I was used to drinking.
When Matt Winton served me his coffee, which was the Eugenioides blended with this really acidic washed Ecuadorian. Eugenioides on its own, I can't drink. I don't like it. But when he paired it with that, I was like, whoa. It was pretty incredible. That's like, the closest thing to biting into confectionery I've had in a coffee.
Yeah. But pretty cool, right? Like, like when we talk about innovation and driving coffee and consumer trend, like this ability now that the whole language of coffee for home, I know you sell blends for filter. 2 or 3 years ago, you saw no blends really in the specialty sense aimed for the filter coffee drinker. It was 100% single origin driven, and really driven around, generally quite expensive micro lots. Where the competitions I think have value is in innovating and driving the coffee conversation in different directions. And certainly I think it's had an impact on opening up that ability for us to blend coffees together in the filter world as well.
Yeah, and I think Winton's work definitely influenced what I do now in a little sense. And it's, to be honest, I feel like that's something that sometimes I have customers that are explicitly single origin only, and I can kind of appreciate that. But the point of a blend is that you combine the best elements of 2 coffees or 3 coffees, whatever it is, to make one really excellent coffee.
Yeah.
And so, some blends might not really hit that, but the point of a blend is to combine the best of both worlds, I guess, make an even better one. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, 100%. I think initially maybe that threw up a few challenges for brewers competitors, because you're then asking 2 coffees to, I suppose, brew consistently. But that's where, the skill set of the competitor, the Brewers Cup competitor has evolved to embrace that option as well.
What do you think the importance of having the competition sort of travel around each year is? Because this is something I've really come to, this is probably one of the things that the coffee industry does best when it comes to competitions, is hosting it in different countries. So we had it in Melbourne here a few years ago. I think last year the Brewers was in, where was it? I can't remember.
Chicago.
Chicago. Yeah, so Chicago. This year it's in Jakarta, and it'll be on the road for a long time yet. What do you think some of the benefits are to having these competitions?
I don't think that could be any more important. Like, I think in terms of the importance of representing the competitions in some of the traditional markets, whether it be the US or Scandinavia or even down here in Australia, it has a huge importance in terms of supporting coffee culture. But I think even more so exciting is to see both trade shows and the competition stepping into new coffee markets. That's where we see the Middle East and China really starting to evolve and build their coffee industries. If the coffee competitions can help support that can only be a great thing. But what I think love the most is maybe when the competitions are traveling to origin and really looking to, I suppose, support some of the producer countries. In terms of my judging memories, I couldn't have a better one than when the Barista Championship traveled to Colombia, which from memory, I think maybe was the first time the competitions had been to a producing country. And the way the competition was celebrated by the industry, the way it was supported in terms of the event, it was like judging within a football stadium, the noise and the atmosphere. Really, just that sense of celebration came from from being in a country that was obsessed with coffee from a producing level, from a livelihoods level. So I think that's really where it's exciting to see it hitting Jakarta next week, and really I think putting the spotlight and the focus on the Indonesian producing community, and I think we will see a lot of their coffees featured in competition, and really speaking to some of the immense innovation of coffee quality that they've had in that region in recent times.
Yeah, and it's interesting because a lot of countries are actually now competing to be able to host these events. It's like a mini Olympics. People put their submissions in, and they're really competitive about wanting to have it in their own backyard. I remember the mood in Dubai when I was there recently. The organizer was saying we're going to move heaven and earth to have it here next year. And my understanding is that the Department of Agriculture is quite involved in Indonesia with getting the event to Jakarta. So there's an element of this that I think the SEA has probably done quite well, is that having the appeal of these competitions to have foreign jurisdictions want to actually compete to host them. So that can only be a good thing, in my opinion.
Yeah, certainly. Like it draws the international coffee community, into that host nation, and it couldn't be more impactful than when you're trying to, obviously promote and sell an entire industry back out to the world.
Why are the bit of a tough one for you on the nose? But why are the results always so late? Like sometimes they'll say on the program, the results will come in at 5 and they'll be like 7. So like what goes on behind the scenes for that to cause that delay? I mean, sometimes the MC just takes their time. I was at a competition recently where they individually read out every volunteer's name, which I thought was a bit excessive. You got to give them their props, but like, come on, we got a show to run here. Why does it take so long sometimes? Because it feels like forever.
I think it really it speaks to what a complicated beast a competition is to run at a national level, and then even an exaggeration at a world level. There's a huge amount happening behind the scenes to really just ensure that we don't stuff anything up, right? We want to ensure before anything gets announced that each barista has been assessed fairly. We need to make sure that the information contained on the score sheets, which is really the only thing a barista gets back, is accurate to the scores they've been given. Really we're looking to ensure that regardless of how long that result has been delayed, that the fair result is given. Really to support the competition.
Yeah.
In an ideal world, everything gone as smooth as we would like to go. We're on schedule. Even then, the competition doesn't finish when the final barista walks off the stage.
I guess
we're still assessing, we're still scoring, we're still entering scores. It's really, I suppose, the unseen side of it. And we're not going to rush it. It would be unfair for us to rush the final competitors just so that we can get a result out a little faster.
I guess everyone's just so eager to hear the results, and that's probably where it comes from. But I've been to some, where it's just like, all right, this is getting on a bit now. But there's a method to the madness, and you don't read out every individual volunteer's name, then you'll get there.
Yeah, look, and part of that falls back on the role that I'll be performing next week as a JOL, during the competition. Like, we'll be really assisting in keeping the judges on schedule, and really making sure that our contribution to it is not slowing down any of the running of the competition, but certainly also making sure we get those results out as fast as we can for some very nervous competitors and some very excited supporters. Yeah.
Are other conditions different in different countries? So let's say, for example, in cricket, when you travel, the pitches in Australia are a bit more suited to fast bowling. In India, it's spin bowling and batting, the pitches favour. One thing I heard about from competitors after the Australian Brewers Cup was they were all skeptical of the temperature that the kettles were or something like that. And they were saying that the electrical, they thought the electrical inputs might have played a role. I didn't believe that, but firstly, what's your assessment on a critique like that? And then secondly, how do the conditions differ from country to country?
I can't actually speak to that situation because that was one of the few finals in recent times that I wasn't actually judging. But the cricket analogy is actually a pretty perfect one, right? Like, if you're a cricket batter and you're traveling to the subcontinent, you practice on a pitch that's going to spin. In a similar sense, if you are prepared as well as maybe you should be as a competitor, you should be prepared for some of those local vagaries. Like power is different in every country. Altitude, we know, plays a big role in terms of actual water temperatures and how coffees are going to brew. Like the prep and the practice that a competitive barista can put in, I suppose, is maybe what should be expected of a world champion. But also on the flip side of that, like all that information is there to be gotten from the WCC. The very open book leading into for any questions that competitors have. We will clarify everything that we possibly can, anything that we've been asked before the competition. The floor is there.
I suppose you've gone through it for a few years now. So if anyone's had a bit of a complaint about it, now you've got a response for it.
Yeah, like our Australian champion, Tom, traveling to Chicago, had to think about, how the power was going to be very different for his kettles in Chicago than it was in Australia. It's just a reality of as you say, the strength of us traveling to different parts of the world will bring these challenges. But we'll certainly demystify as many of those before the competition as we can.
So if you're a competitor, you should keep note of like the power, so it differentiates with your plugs and stuff like that. I guess the humidity would play a role in how some of it brews and particularly how some of it grinds as well. What else? I mean, the temperature, altitude. I suppose that they're like those are the little 1%ers that could make you a champion or not.
Yeah, and look, and a lot of the competitors will be adjusting somewhat once they actually reach Jakarta. I suppose the final 2% might actually be what they achieve once they're on the ground, because there is only so much you can practice at home. Really, what you're looking to ultimately control is the variables for competing on stage, and that stage is in Jakarta.
Interesting. Yeah, it'll be. I'm really excited to see. I'm really excited to go try some coffees while I'm over there. What do you think some more things that the viewers, listeners to this show should know that perhaps we haven't spoken about relating to the Brewers Cup competition? Like, what would you like more people to know about the competition itself and perhaps even through the eyes of a judge?
I think for Brewers Cup, demystifying the compulsory round is often a real challenge. Whilst we speak to that being, I suppose, the strength in terms of testing, the discipline of brewing coffee and finding a champion, it's not the most, I suppose, engaging for the coffee public. There's not in that round a commentary from the competitor as to what they're doing and I suppose what the result is of the choices that they've made with that one coffee. So I think we probably need to set up the expectations around that round. But then I think from my side, my side is very much focused on judges, right? And I think the role of those three sensory judges sitting there and a head judge in terms of what they're doing and what they're looking for is something that hopefully formats like this will demystify somewhat. But also really, I suppose, just setting up also a recognition of what the judges are there for. Like this word judging, I think often carries a connotation of critiquing or punishing. That's really not our role as judges. We're really there to give every available score that we have to a competitor and really looking to support every competitor we can with the most that we can reward them. So really, I think the spirit in which the coffee competitions are judged maybe a little falsely recognized as us punishing competitors. We're really not. We're celebrating them in everything that we can do.
One thing that's kind of gotten a lot of online conjecture recently that I've seen is the changing of the cupping score sheet for assessing coffee. So previously it's been administered by the SEA, and we mentioned it a few times here. And it goes through things, again, like acidity, sweetness, aftertaste, aroma, and taste balance and things like that. And my understanding is that's changing. There's been a directive to kind of change that protocol. And I'll tell you what, people aren't happy about it. A lot of people are saying some wild things like, it's kind of, it makes it more challenging for the poorest of people to work around this. People that won't even recognize it at all in the industry. I don't fully understand it myself, but perhaps you could outline to us what's it changing to?
Yeah, look, I mean, like I suppose I'm also not the expert in terms of exactly what, the SEA is looking to achieve with the move to what we, call the CVA style of scoring versus, I suppose, the more traditional CQI cupping sheets that we've used previously.
So SEA, for those listening, is Specialty Coffee Association. What's CVA?
So CVA is the coffee value assessment tool that is, I suppose, the replacement model which they're looking to introduce.
And CQI?
Coffee Quality Institute are the organization which has previously run, I suppose, the workshops and the certification protocol to become a Q grader, recognizing your ability to use those score sheets and I suppose be relatively expert in doing so.
Pardon me, I derailed you here. So I wanted everyone to know what we were talking about there. So changing of the score sheet to something that does what?
I think where the current challenge and maybe conflict comes into play is there has to be a logical point, right, at which you say, well, we're not going to use this anymore, we're going to use this. There will be a period of time in which I suppose the CVA, once it has become the new standard model, really needs to prove that it's better. So time will tell, and I'm confident that time will tell with that. But really, I think when I look at it from my lens, it really just recognizes the evolution in the coffee industry, right? And certainly when I, back in the day when I got my Q grader, we were still really at that stage in terms of the early days of, I suppose, the specialty industry boom, really looking to assess coffees in terms of how they differed or how much they were better than a commercial lot of coffee. So that's where we had this arbitrary 79 score, and anything above was specialty. And it put us in these really narrow bands of scoring, but also a very narrow band of what was deemed to be a quality cup of coffee. That was very focused on, on sweetness and consistency, and basically that it didn't have a defect, right? Outside of that, I don't think it really had, for me, the greatest ability to describe that cup of coffee.
Okay.
And really what the new tools are allowing us to do is really apply some level or a little more level of subjectivity in terms of what we're looking for in a coffee for it to be excellent to our taste or to our coffee choices, but still apply a consistent scoring structure to that.
Well, I guess to that end, to outline a little hypothetical scenario here, there's a lot of not necessarily, but there's a lot of people I know that are very experienced coffee people that only really fundamentally believe in a certain style of coffee being high quality. So what's that? Like the apex being, a washed geisha, and then, not much room for anything else in their opinion. And so through that lens, I can kind of understand why you would want to open up the ability to more fairly assess other coffees as being in that high level of stature, because to that end, the highest scoring best of Panamas, you don't see them in a Brewers Cup competition. But you will see a Eugenoides. You will see a CM McCarver. You will see, I don't even know what won last year, but you'll see all those other things that win the competitions and the barista competitions as well. And so, maybe we're not looking at it properly. There's probably a bunch of people that are going to destroy me for this, but do I have a point?
Yeah, well, I mean, the coffee world has changed so fundamentally in terms of what's available, what we do and we don't like, than even say 10 years ago. So continuing to assess that in the same, using the same score sheet or the same, I suppose, quality assessment protocol seems to me redundant.
Yeah.
I can't say which is the better of those two tools yet, but it would suggest to me that there's a logical point at which we need to recognize that the coffees that people are drinking now, the coffees that people are, like you say, either loving or not loving, still need to find a way to assess to put a quality stamp on that, I suppose.
And yeah, I guess what kind of, if to put it in my own anecdotal sort of experience, is that since the time I entered coffee to now, the processing has changed so dramatically that it's like it's permeated to all countries. Like I remember seeing the first anaerobic I ever tried was, I think, from Colombia or Ethiopia, and now you see it in Burundi, you see it in Ecuador, you see it everywhere, and it's just something that, yeah, maybe we need to evolve with the times. It's like good coffee is not necessarily a clean wash geisha anymore or a clean wash couture. It is the anaerobic. It is the carbonic maceration. So
yeah, I mean, look, I started my specialty and just my specialty journey at a time when this word single origin was coming into play. That word single origin meant that it was one coffee from one producing nation.
Yeah,
it was hardly specific. We now live in a world where that's really evolved into very traceable micro lots, which have they're a particular varietal processed a particular way from a particular estate. It's transformed our ability to taste coffees far more specific in their taste profile, and that will mean that we face far more coffees, I think, also that we just don't like. But we also need to be able to assess why we don't like them, and objectively put that against a scoring protocol.
One thing that I feel like has probably, this is my own assessment, is that there's a lot of conjecture or discussion around what the president of the SCA gets paid, for example. And one thing that I've seen in all this sort of hysteria, I guess you call it, rejecting this, is that it's always linked to how much he gets paid, which is a lot. It's like $760K or something per year, US dollars. I don't have a problem with paying someone that much money to do that job if they're delivering results and there's outcomes. And it's like, for the amount of you're investing, you're getting a significant return. If you are, sweet. Who am I to judge? Where I do see people having an issue with it is there are so many volunteers in the organization. So it's like, well, I don't get paid anything and you get paid a lot. And, it's probably not the world's best finance thing, but I mean, to me, that seems like some of this angst is linked to that. And that's why I can't draw a proper picture myself. I'm not going to ask you to comment on that. I'm just going to say my own because, yeah, I feel like that has been one of the biggest correlations, I guess you'd say. Yeah. So my own 2 cents there. If you have anything to add.
But like you say, the proof will be in the pudding, right? Like if it's that sum is not controversial when it's looking to drive and create as substantive change as the SCA is currently trying to do. And I would imagine if you looked through industry bodies of similar nature, it's not unusual.
Yeah. And maybe there's a broader discussion there about CEO pay in general in society, but
yeah, and that's coming from someone that's volunteered innumerable hours to the SCA.
Yeah.
I have no problem with it.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, one last thing that we'll finish on is you sort of told me about some work that your wife's doing actually with an organization called SCARF, which is giving refugees, so people that have come here fleeing, sort of persecution or other circumstances in their own country, the skills to enter the hospitality workforce here in Australia. And I'm sure there's numerous other organizations around the world that do this in other countries. But I wanted to draw a particular amount of attention to this because you told me you're just going to a function with your partner. And I think something like this is great. There's a lot of, let's just say, immigration hasn't got the best PR right now across the world. There's a lot of negative connotations to it. But the reality is a lot of people are escaping horrific conditions and they get granted political. It's not easy to become a refugee in Australia. If you travel we're an island country, so it's not as easy as just walking across a border. You have to come here by boat, and often those boats sink, and a lot of people drown. And in Australia, we've got quite a punitive, I guess, policy towards people that are refugees, and they actually get taken to another country, processed indefinitely until they effectively say, "I want to go back to where I was before." So a lot of people would say that's quite cruel. But anyway, back to what we're talking about here. I think this is extraordinary. How can more people sort of, I guess, bring awareness to this, and can we get maybe anyone listening who wants to sponsor it can get behind it?
Yeah, I mean, look, the refugee community here in Australia, as in every part of the world, are looking to build new lives. They're looking to contribute. What they do find oftentimes is because they don't maybe have the relevant experience in those markets, a lot of those doors are closed to them. So what the SCARF organisation is doing is providing real world skills to, in this case, young refugees, to actually spend time in businesses here in Melbourne, particularly, with the backing of SCARF, to get real world skills to then go out and take out into the hospitality industry. Some of that even just comes back to how to interview for a job, how to put a CV together, which is relevant to the Melbourne market. But the transformative journeys that I've had the pleasure to see for some of these kids, going from really sort of disenfranchised and frustrated to the most incredible ambassadors for, whether it be working for a brewery or, working within a hotel, or importantly, I suppose for us also, working in a number of cafes and roasteries around the city. The transformative journeys is just incredible to see.
Yeah, and I guess that's what I'd like people to think of more when it comes to these sorts of things. A lot of people can be quite skeptical out there in the world, but a lot of people just want to get on with their lives and live peacefully. And we're like, sometimes it's hard. Like, having traveled a little bit this year, I feel like you've actually won the lottery being born in a country like Australia and some of the other Western nations as well. So, I mean, I just think if someone else can have the opportunity to flee whatever, come here and get the skills and build a new life, that's awesome. So congratulations.
Yeah, and certainly hospitality, I can only recommend as much to business owners as to hire on attitude, right? Aptitude can be taught very easily. Giving chances to people that really want a job and are looking to really prove themselves could not give you a better attitude. And all I would say is encouraging employers to really take that on and take a chance. Hire on attitude.
Well, yeah, and there's plenty of room for that in Melbourne. There's more baristas than there are. There's more jobs available for baristas than there are baristas to fill.
Never enough baristas in Melbourne. That's for sure.
There's tremendous opportunity there. So if you're an organisation, consider SCARF. One question I'm going to start asking each person I interview is, who would you like me to interview in the coffee industry? Because I'm sure Brydon Price has someone that you thought, oh, mate, I'd like to hear their voice more. Or I'd like to, if I had a spare hour and a half for a coffee show with Kirk, I'd like to hear them. Who would you suggest to us? Take a second. Cook on it.
He's cooking up something great here.
Should probably hate me saying it, but I have my own sort of coffee hero. She is a woman who is also very involved in the competition scene. But Emma Markland-Webster, who she's actually the competition coordinator for New Zealand, amongst other things, was very much the person that set me on my coffee journey. She has traveled to and supported innumerable events around the world, totally dwarfing my contribution, and made such a contribution to so many baristas, competitive baristas, judges. I think she has a fairly unique view into the side of the industry that really excites me. So she'd be one person that I'd love to see you sit down with.
Well, I guess that's an interesting point to sort of wrap up with, because so many people like yourself, and I'm sure you get a lot of fulfillment out of doing it, but you volunteer so much of your own time over the years to doing this. And it's kind of to build something that other people can benefit off in the later years. Like, every year that we do this, we're building a bigger and better competition that will better serve the industry in the years to come. So just imagine where we're going to be in 20 years from now, thanks to volunteered time from people like yourself and Emma Markland-Webster. Is that yeah. So, I mean, yeah, on behalf of everyone that agrees with me, thank you, Brydon, because the work that you do is invaluable, and it provides a competition and for other people to be able to go and compete, do what they love, and potentially win and get a lucrative career out of it themselves. So, we owe you.
But I've done it for so many years because it's exciting and it fills my cup. It's been a big part of why I've been in the specialty industry now 25 plus years. So to be able to share some of that and demystify some of that is something I'll always be up for. So thanks for having me on.
No worries. Well, if you would like to watch the World Brewers Cup, you can go to just type in on Google World of Coffee. I don't actually have the website on me here, but that seems to always change. Is it World Coffee Championships?
There will be a live stream.
Yes. So I would encourage you all to watch the live stream. It'll be on for over 3 days. Tune into some of your competitors. I'm going to be biased here. I'm going to be rooting for Tom Hutchins from Australia, representing Code Black Coffee. So go, Tom. I'm rooting for you. 3 times in a row, Australian Brewers Cup champion.
Pretty close last year.
So, and I thought his coffee that he used to win the nationals this year was extraordinary from Campo Hermoso. So I'm excited to see what he does. If you would like to order some coffee yourself, this podcast is sponsored by none other than Project Zero Coffee. So projectzero.coffee, if you're based in Australia, you can order some of your own coffee. I would encourage you to do so. It's delicious. I can vouch for that. Thanks again so much, Brydon, for coming on. I think this will be an absolute service for anyone who wants to watch, wants to know more about the competition, or if you're competing. If you're a competitor, you should watch this podcast because one of the judges who's teaching the judges is giving you some snippets here. So you should watch. So thanks again, Brydon. We're there.